Welcome to the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. In each episode, we will discuss professionals serving the tech startup market and the various issues of importance to those companies. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. Now here's the host of From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, Phil Crowley.
Welcome, and thanks for joining our podcast today. You know, our goal is to bring you conversations with experts in the life sciences and technology who can provide insights into starting and running successfully a company focused on commercializing technology. Our hope is to give you the information that you need to increase your chances for success and at the same time help you avoid costly and avoidable errors. Today, I'm delighted to have with us Dr. Jhanna Ali, a life sciences expert with experience in academia, in operating companies, and even as a professional venture capital investor. She has a wealth of experience to share from various perspectives. Jhanna, welcome.
Thank you so much, Phil.
Jhanna, I always like to find out how people wind up in biotech. You're obviously a very accomplished person and very intelligent, so you could have done a whole host of things. Why did you wind up in biotech?
So I'll tell you, Phil, that wasn't the plan. I spent the first 11 years of my life living next to hospitals. My mom was a physician, and for the first 8 years, our yard actually was next to the delivery room for the hospital. And the rest of the time, it was the ER. So I grew up being very curious about what happens inside that building. And so many years later, I decided to pursue a PhD in bioscience. However, like during graduate school, I realized that my interest in science didn't quite align with what I was doing in the lab. Because what you do in the lab is so narrow. And people would ask me, oh, did you hear about this new drug? What do you think? And I felt like I really couldn't answer them as an expert because my field was extremely narrow. Mm-hmm. So after completing my PhD, I decided, to do something else. I did do a postdoc, but during my postdoc, I became a science writer for Rockefeller University. It's not a paid role, but I got bylines. And so I worked with this amazing woman, Kay Lossiger, who taught me the power of editing because you can write things, but really it's an art. So you write, you rewrite, and she would edit these articles, and I still have them. They're wonderful. So these articles really helped me get a project with a licensing office at NYU. Mm-hmm. And at NYU, what I was doing was they would give me patents, and my job was to create marketing summaries. And this is what kind of clicked in my brain. Wow, this is so much fun because I get to learn about a different aspect of science. It's exciting. And so that's how I kind of got into biotech innovation space. I really realized that was my home.
All right. So you went into academia, you were an academic researcher, then you went onto the licensing side and then got your spot with NYU. What happened after the licensing spot?
Yeah, so the job at NYU was a consulting role. I was basically writing marketing summaries for them. And, just working with a person who was in licensing at NYU. However, that opportunity, because after writing like 20 marketing summaries for them, they realized I probably knew more about each of the technologies than any one person there. So they invited me to the bio meeting, which was in New York, and I got to man their booth. And there I met a person who would be my next boss, and that was at Mount Sinai School of Medicine. So that was really my first technology transfer job, was Mount Sinai School of Medicine.
And what sorts of technologies did you deal with at Mount Sinai?
Oh, all sorts of technology. It was They had a strong genetics department. So we did some interesting licenses for those enzymes for rare genetic diseases with Genzyme. Genzyme built a big business around protein therapy for rare disorders where there's either a single mutation or single gene that was involved. What else? I did a really interesting license for GnRH receptor. And many years
What
later,
is that? What is that, Jhanna?
yes,
Our
so
audience may not understand what that one is.
it's a gonadotropin releasing hormone receptor, and we actually had a patent on the gene itself, because this is before the patent office didn't allow patents on targets.
Mm-hmm.
So a number of non-exclusive licenses for this. And the one that I did was with a small biotech company in California. It's a product on the market. It's sold by AbbVie. And I was actually deposed for that as well. So that was kind of fun.
What does it do? What's the therapeutic target?
Yeah, so it's used for a number of different cancers. I believe ovarian cancer. It could also be used for some other. I'm not exactly sure what other, but I know it's used for ovarian cancer.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you were kind of licensing out these great life-saving inventions for Mount Sinai, which is, a wonderful world-known place. What was your next? What did that prepare you for?
Yeah, so I loved Mount Sinai, but one of the things I always heard from people on the academic side was like, "Oh, you guys are being unrealistic," and so I really wanted to experience the constraints on the company side. So I was at Sinai for about 4 years, and then I got an opportunity to join an early stage biotech company called Mojave Therapeutics. And that was out of Sloan Kettering. They were developing therapeutic vaccines against melanoma and HIV. And I joined Mojave as an associate director of BD.
And what was the difference between being in a big organization like Mount Sinai and moving over into this smaller organization that was really trying to commercialize the innovation?
Mojave was a 30-person company, but what I learned there was the power of working as a team. So at Sinai and in many tech transfer offices, although they have changed over the years, it's kind of an individualistic. You have your portfolio that you're managing, you have faculty members that you are serving, but it's more individuals. Whereas every time we would do a collaboration, a license at Mojave, the finance guy would be involved, the patent guy, the regulatory guy. So it was really kind of very powerful to hear everybody's perspective and incorporate that in the term sheet. I found that really kind of a lot of fun.
So it sounds like communication and teamwork at the startup level is incredibly important, I guess, because everybody is wearing multiple hats because you can't afford to hire all the people that the big companies have.
Yeah, but you learn a lot from other people because everybody has a different skill set. Mm-hmm. And the more you can understand kind of adjacent, I think it just how you can contribute enhances greatly. So it was interesting to me how the finance guy was thinking about that license and the fees, etc. How the IP guy was thinking, looking at the claims. Everybody's looking at a different point of view on this one deal.
Well, it certainly underscores a point that I've made repeatedly to my clients and others who are thinking about starting companies, that having a multi-talented team is important to have the benefit of all of those various perspectives on any transaction or any major decision that the company has to make. So you worked at that company in the business development area. What did that prepare you for? Because I see, your experience, Jhanna, is kind of building expertise, building experience that prepares you for the next launch, because you seem like quite an adventurous person. So I can understand how you get involved in entrepreneurship, because you're willing to try things and to stretch yourself. What was the next step?
Yeah, so I loved Mojave, but after about 2 years, our technology was sold to a larger company. And at that time, I joined Hospital for Special Surgery, and I led their tech transfer operation. But the tech transfer operation there was part of a larger business development group. And again, it was a wonderful learning experience. And I'll tell you how. So HSS didn't have a lot of patents. I mean, they did, but the research group was fairly small. So the patent portfolio was small. But at HSS, I learned like you have to see what your assets are. So what did we have at HSS? We had a lot of surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, top of the line surgeons, for team doctors for Mets, team doctors for Yankees. And then we had engineers. So HSS had engineers on staff, and they had a machine shop. These engineers, could do a lot of stuff. So we started to do product development agreements. And that was kind of, to me, I was used to at Sinai having a lot of IP and doing mostly licenses, research collaborations, MTAs, all the typical agreements. But here I learned something new, like how you do product development. So small to mid-sized orthopedic companies would love to develop a product that was kind of, named after a surgeon, like a Skulko knee. Dr. Skulko was very famous orthopedic surgeon in those days. So that was, I learned how to kind of mine assets and create businesses around. And it was not my idea. The brainchild was Patty Mullen, who was my boss there, and who I will still say is one of the most creative people I have ever met.
That's wonderful to have a person who's a boss, and also it sounds like sort of a mentor to you to try to help you understand the bigger picture of what you're doing and how what you're doing fits into the overall scheme. All right, how long were you at the Hospital for Special Surgery?
I feel like I've perennially been in college, so almost all my stints are 4 years. I think I like school so much that because you learn in 4 years, you accomplish something, and then I'm one of those people who really loves to learn and onto a new thing and a new way of learning. So I was there for about 4 years, and we did a lot of creative things at HSS, like the product development thing that I told you. We also had an investment fund. We started kind of an orthopedic accelerator with the partnership fund. It was called New York City Investment Fund. And through that, I met the folks there. And after I had left HSS, they were looking for somebody with biotech experience. So then I joined the partnership fund. And I led biotech investments there. I don't know if you know what the partnership fund is, but it's an investment arm of Partnership for New York City, which is a business advocacy organization. So all the large businesses in New York City are members, and Kathy Wild, who heads it, advocates on behalf of, to make New York City a good place for business and a good place to live. She's a pretty impressive lady. So on the investment side, in addition to making investments, we made small investments and we didn't lead them. But the goal was really to grow the biotech sector. Because New York City, again, it was like, what are the assets? We have 7 academic medical centers.
Right. World famous medical centers, I might add, as well.
Yeah. And yet, so we have, if you look at NIH funding, I think at this point, we're parallel with Boston, if not a little more, okay? However, when you look at the venture funding for the earlier stages, we're like behind. And even today, but at that time, it was like awful. But New York has come a long way. I'll give New York that. But even now, I think for whatever reasons, so if you're developing interesting technology in New York, it's less likely to, become a business or a startup company than if you're in a Boston or San Francisco area.
So that's, I guess, a function of the willingness of investors to invest in the biotech area and the number of investors who are active in that area.
Yeah, it's the type of investors you have in a region. We have a lot of money in New York, but we didn't have the investors doing the seed investment, right?
Right. Well, that is crucial. At this point, I'm going to ask you a question about and give you a little bit of time to think about the answer of what you looked for when you were looking at potential investments and what biotech companies should focus on when they come to a venture capitalist. But now I'd just like to take a minute to acquaint our audience with Crowley Law. We are a boutique law firm that's passionate about helping life sciences and other technology innovators and their companies realize their dreams to take, as I've named the podcast, great ideas from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside, or from the garage to the marketplace to enrich the lives of thousands or even millions of people. I'm a former research physicist who, very much like Jahan, found that my work, which was in superconductivity, was very intense, very particular, but it would be a long time before the things that I was researching would actually help people. And I wanted to have a greater impact. And so that's why I chose the law. So as a researcher, I know how hard it is to find new knowledge and the successes, the setbacks, the disappointments. And founders are a very hardy bunch, founders and innovators. But as a lawyer, I know how difficult it is to take even successful technologies from the research phase to the marketplace. And so what we focus on is trying to protect founders and innovators along that journey by helping them form companies, enter into contracts, enter into financing agreements, work with collaboration and license agreements with strategic partners to try to help them create products and services that enrich the lives of thousands or millions of people. So if you're an innovator out there who have some ideas and would like to have a conversation, please come out to our website. We have a number of free resources available there. It's Crowley Law LLC.com. And if you're in the market for advice or need help, please contact us at info@crowleylawllc.com. We're here to help. All right, Jahan, I gave you a little bit of time to mentally go through your decision process. What are the sorts of things that biotech innovators should keep in mind when they're approaching venture capitalists or other sources of financing?
Yeah. So basically, you were asking how did we look at investments? So
Yes.
we generally had like a funnel, okay? And top of the funnel, first you do an intro call with a company, and you see them take you through their slide deck, etc., and you look to see if it's in your areas of interest, it's at the right stage. Okay, so for a lot of entrepreneurs, they should make sure when they're reaching out to investors that these are the investors, it's that you're at the right stage of the game for them. If they're Series A, that you're looking for Series A, and if you're a sequencing company, that this company, this investor is interested in that subject. So that's top level. And then if that company meets those criteria and we are kind of interested in what this company is doing, there's a number of things we look. And the top of the funnel, I would say, is the team. It's extremely important to get conviction around that this team can execute. They are honorable people, so to say.
Yes.
And so things like that. The team is, I would say, even more important than technology. And that is even more so in like digital health and tech side than biotech per se, although team is important in both. Technology. So it's important for investors to understand that the technology is interesting, is far enough along, like if you're in biotech, that you have a lead, depending on the stage of the company, of course. And there's, then you will get into the nitty gritty of the technology that yes, the company has freedom to operate. the finances make sense. If you're more on the digital health, does company have some traction? Have they done a pilot? So
Right.
then things start to differ. But I would say team, number one, your technology, traction, and then the other things that need to add up, like the financials. And the belief that whatever the amount of money the company is asking, they will be able to execute and increase the value of the company, the valuation from what it is today.
I see. Well, if I understand you correctly, it sounds like companies, just like financing sources, have to do some due diligence. The companies have to, instead of taking a blunderbuss approach of just going out to every source of financing and venture capital organization on the map, to try to find those venture capital funds that have shown an interest in the particular area in which they are interested, and
Yeah.
then to do a hard look at themselves and see if they have, as you were saying, the team where you can convince the venture capitalists that this is the team thing that can be successful. Because as you know, and as you probably experienced, there are many setbacks in young companies developing technology. Not everything works the way you expect it to work. And there are many opportunities to quit if things don't work. And so you need to have people with grit and the determination to make the technology work. And that seems to be an important part of the preparation to make a presentation and deal with an appropriate source of financing after the startup company has done its due diligence. So you have a lot of experience in that area now, but you left the fund. I guess this is another college education. Was it 4 years or less than 4 years?
It's 4 years.
4 years. So the next college of knowledge
Yeah.
that you went to, where was that?
So I did some consulting, and maybe that wasn't 4 years, it was for 3 years. So I had a number of clients. I felt when I was at the partnership, I was doing all these programs. Like I ran a BioAccelerate. I ran like a competition for academics. There were 2 of those kind of accelerator programs, one in digital health, one more traditional biotech. And I felt like I had veered too far off from my science background.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back to one of my clients. It was a consultancy. I think I was there for about 2.5 days each week at International AIDS Vaccine Initiative. And I don't know if you're familiar with it's like a biopharma company, but a nonprofit one. And
Right.
it's
Isn't that supported by the Gates Foundation?
Yeah, the primary funders of IAVI when I was there were Gates Foundation, one, and USAID. So we did a lot of sample collection in Africa, had clinics in Africa, did some tech transfer there. So those were areas of interest to USAID. It was an interesting organization, the types of things we did. We did a lot of, creating white papers on HIV. And then we managed consortiums. So we had like 10 different academic scientists across the US, even in England and some other European countries. And there were areas of project like neutralizing antibody projects, or it was more finding antigens for, antigen optimization, I might say. That's not the right word. And so we managed those consortiums. And there was a formula of how, if there were inventions, what everybody would get, etc. It was interesting. It was yet different kinds of agreements. I think with all these agreements, there are different types. I learned how to put structure, not just on agreements. I think it's important. Like people want to do stuff. You have to spend time and think about how you're going to put. And you're right. You know that better than anybody. That's what you do.
That is true.
Yeah.
Thinking about that. So you worked at IAVI. Where did you go after IAVI?
Yeah, so I was working at IAVI, and I was also working with some of these accelerator programs in New York, like eLab NYC, where I was a coach, and then I taught courses for them, and then I was a mentor. And then some of the startups would become my clients, and I was basically helping them negotiate term sheets from their universities, doing MTAs, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I joined Weill Cornell, and that's where I met you.
That's right. So tell us a little bit, to tell our audience a little bit about the Weill Cornell BioVentures program.
Yeah, so BioVenture was basically the entrepreneurship hub for Weill Cornell. And as you know, I mean, you see it, everybody's interested in entrepreneurship. When I started out as a scientist and I went to Sinai, I was shocked. I was like, oh, wow, I had all these reagents. We could have made money from those reagents. But as a scientist, you really were shielded from that. Any money making, it was kind of looked down upon in those days anyway. But now every scientist wants to learn, understand, and participate. So I think it was the right time. And when I joined the BioVenture eLab, they had certain programs. I think my achievements there was, one, I brought more faculty, because it's hard to just start companies. It's hard for just postdocs to start companies.
Right.
Because faculty and the lab head kind of regulates what can happen with the IP, with the tech transfer office. So that model didn't work. You needed faculty to be involved. So I think I had credibility and I brought amazing mentors, like you included. So faculty felt like, oh, I can work with this program. And then once we had faculty on board, then we started reduce the friction points. Number one friction point is money, as you know. So we started the Invest Connect conference. So investors and faculty founders can meet and learn, get to know each other. And relationship is so important, because you're going to invest in somebody that you know. I remember the team part.
Right. And I've certainly seen in my practice that investment bankers and investors like to have a feeling that they know the people who are involved in the company, have a relationship with them. And so I've found that it is useful for companies when they're thinking at some point in the future, they may want to interact or engage an investment banker or a venture capitalist, to have some chats occasionally to keep in touch and tell them how you're doing, and then come back in 6 months and show that actually you've been able to accomplish all the things that you told them you were going to be able to do, and perhaps a little bit more, because that establishes in the mind of the financing source that these are people who are dependable, who can work together, who can get things done, just as you were saying, Jhanna.
Yeah, that's priceless. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's priceless. That you meet somebody, they kind of tell you, you really need to do an experiment comparing it to standard of care, and you actually go back to them with that experiment. It just builds so much credibility. Everybody likes that somebody listened to them. Now they love you.
Well, if you had one or two bits of advice that you would argue to biotech and other technology entrepreneurs that these are things that you should really focus on in building a company, what advice would you give to somebody who wanted to start to set up a life sciences or a technology company?
Yeah. So I have two pieces of advice, and one is a general piece of advice that I think is not specific to biotech, but I think it's always helpful to start a company or any project for that matter with an end in mind. Because if you have an end in mind, like maybe you want to develop this technology and sell it to Medtronic in 1 year, you know what I mean? It's a different business plan than you want to really create a company with multiple products and have an IPO one day.
Right.
So those are two different. So start with an end in mind, and then measure your progress against that goal. This not only keeps you honest with yourself, it helps you understand, are you committed? Because if you're not spending time and not meeting those goals, you may as well know that about yourself, that you really think you want to do it, but you don't really. Because if you really want to do it, you'll spend time. It'll tell you if you're making progress, and it'll also tell you, does the project have legs? So I think that's just a general piece of advice. And I try to do that myself, so I thought of that. And then the other is, many biotech innovators are scientists. If you're a scientist, and you don't know the business side, find mentors, find people. I mean, people are very generous. In New York, I find there's so many amazing mentors doing it pro bono.
Mm-hmm.
And they can help bridge the gaps in your knowledge, right? And be willing to learn. Because I see time and time again, some scientists, they'll work with a VC, and then they realize later on that they really got taken. You know what I mean?
Right.
They should have involved mentors, should have talked to people, what are the comps, etc. But they didn't do that.
Right.
So right now, I happen to be working with a biotech innovator who exemplifies this beautifully. He is a clinician, MD, PhD background,
Mm-hmm.
but he really has good people around him. And he realizes he has the presence of mind to know what he doesn't know. And as a result, he's been able to raise money, in a relatively tough environment.
That is a great story. Well, the time has really flown by, John. John, thank you so much for sharing your experience and the valuable tips that you were able to give our innovators today. So I'd ask our audience, if you like our podcast, please like it, subscribe to it, share it with your friends, and help us get the word out so that valuable information like the information that Jahan shared with us today can be widely available to innovators so that they are successful. Please visit our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com, where we have a great number of free resources for you. And just remember that we are here to help. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Phil, for having me. I really enjoyed.
You've been tuning into the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe, like, leave a positive review, and share with others.